All righty. Welcome everyone to our second session of the virtual beef series with a focus on heifers this year. Tonight we have the extreme pleasure of welcoming our forage specialist, Dr. Bruno Pedreira. Obviously, heifers, cows, bulls, they all enjoy the forage that Mother Nature's provides. So it's a little bit more challenging to make a heifer specific class for grazing. But Dr. Perdera is going to do a great job just talking about grazing management, some different theories and things that we can do to be able to manage that we can apply to any of them, but especially that we can apply to our heifers. So we're very fortunate. So we're also really excited. Hopefully that this summer rains are going to extend into fall. We have a great fall season to be able to do a lot of management, not only to what we currently have, but for future. So we look forward to hearing what you have to say, Dr. Pedreira, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, man. Thanks for putting this together. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today to talk about grazing management. And I'll do my best to entertain you guys in the next 45 minutes to an hour, so we won't spend the whole night here on this. And as you mentioned, I think this year's focus is the heifers, right? But it's grass is the kind of thing that every ruminant will appreciate, and most of our animals in a farm will appreciate that as well. So what we'll try to do tonight is walk you guys through a few things, and there is no way I can talk about the grazing management without talking about yield and quality, right? I think that the main goal the main goal behind grazing management is to try to uh, uh, kind of reach that sweet spot where we can have grass growing and bringing us resilience and persistence to the plant. So from a forage plant perspective, I need to respect that plant. But on the other side, I need to feed the animals, right? I need to allow those pastures to be grazed, and and that's the dilemma here. It's when we try to weight those two sides and identify where's that sweet spot where I can have good forage and good animal performance as well. So we'll talk a little bit about this yield and quality challenge, and then we'll dive into the grazing management, talking about some of our stocking methods, and I will wrap up talking about the technology that we have been using. We had a field day last week at the Ames plantation in Fayette County, and we have been using some. And see, those are the pictures here that you can see right now. Those are our heifers right now at the Ames plantation. We have 30 heifers there that we have been grazing them using those virtual fencing collars. So we'll wrap up with this. Well, moving forward, there are a few things that will define for us in the field, you know, what is our quality and what's the yield when we're talking about pastures, when we are grazing forages to feed our animals, right? And I like to bring all of these four categories. We need to talk about weather. We need to talk about maturity, genotype, and management. When we put those four things together, we will understand, how much forage we can grow and how much we are going to affect the quality as we grow that forage. And there is no way we can talk about this without starting with weather, right? That's my first variable. We are just talking about this. It just got a huge thunderstorm here when you talk about August. July and August used to be hot and dry in Tennessee, right? It's been hot, but it's not been dry. This summer was kind of a different one. Probably we haven't had one in a few years. And we still have fescue growing even in July and August this year, which is completely different from a so-called normal year, if we still have one normal year, right? But every time we need to deal with temperature, rainfall, and day length. So when we put all of those things together, we will really define how much forage I'm growing and what is the chemical composition, digestibility of those forests, right? And I won't get into the weeds here, but it will change everything in a plant since its own cell, right? It will change the cell content, it will change the cell wall, because the more we can grow and the faster we grow those plants, the more cell wall I need, the more lignin, the more fiber I need to sustain the leaves we are growing there. So every time I'm thinking about weather and I'm thinking about, the temperature has been good for cool season plants or good for warm season plants. How does that connect with the rainfall? Did we have a good rainfall in the last few weeks, in the last few months? It all together will define the pace and the velocity that everything is happening in the field right now. So, for example, if I allow a plant to grow in the field for 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks, I'm pretty sure that the longer I allow those plants to rest and that paddock is isolated from grazing, the higher is going to be the yield, right? But also the digestibility is going down as we allow more and more weeks into that growth. So here we can see that, you can start with a forage that might give you 64% digestibility, but 8, 10, 12 weeks later, you don't have more than 50% of that forage with digestible. The pattern is the same with crude protein. So here we have again another forage that if you had harvested that forage with 4 weeks, we would have a 15% crude protein on that forage. But if you allow that thing to be there for another 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and we only harvest that forage after 8 weeks of growing during the growing season, we are probably talking about a 8%, 7% crude protein forage. So the longer it takes to us to come back to that pasture, the lower is going to be the quality on that pasture. And does that work the same when we are talking about grasses and legumes? That's a fair question, right? And that's the reason I like to use these two graphs here to show you that, if we have alfalfa, and you can think about an alfalfa hayfield or alfalfa pasture, we can start with 20+% crude protein. But as we go into the season again, and we get into the bud, 10% of a bloom, half a bloom, full bloom, or full mature plants, we may end up with an alfalfa that has no more than 13% crude protein. So when you compare that with fescue in the very beginning, yes, there is a way I can have a early mature fescue that will have better quality than a very old, very mature alfalfa, right? Is this a common thing to find? No, because we are trying to harvest that alfalfa with 10% bloom, right? So I can get 18, 20% of crude protein on it. But again, it's that's what I want to, you guys to think with me tonight. How long does that take to me to come back to that pasture? We are on the rationale of the grazing management here in the end of the day. So in my second graph here, you can see that's the same with fescue, and the pattern is the same. If you cut fescue early, you may have 15, 16, 18% crude protein. But as we go into the season, and the later we get into the growing season, and the more we allow that forage to grow and not be able to harvest it or graze it in May, for example, if we get into June and July, we may end up with a fescue that has no more than 7, 8% crude protein. A few weeks ago, I got a forage sample here in the lab from a producer working with a Bermuda grass pasture, and he was very disappointed with the number we had provided to him, and he didn't like the forage report, so he decided to send it to another lab out of the state, and the numbers came back exactly the same. And then he mailed to me both of the tests and said, Bruno, I didn't like yours. Yeah, I didn't like UT's forage test numbers. I sent it out of state and I end up with the same. So now I think I need help because at first I thought you were doing something wrong, but now that I have double tested and everything's the same, I think I need help on this. What am I doing wrong? It was a Bermuda test, a Bermuda field with like 7% crude protein. And he told me the whole story. He had applied nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, everything in good shape. He did everything by the books using soil test. He just missed one thing. He couldn't harvest that hay in the right time. He harvested that hay probably 3 or 4 weeks later than what was supposed to. So when we were talking, I asked him, how many seed heads, what was the proportion of the pasture, the percentage of the pasture that had seed heads when we harvested Bermuda? And he said, oh, no, it was all over. I don't think I had a single plant that didn't have a seed head. So in my opinion, I told him that he was at least 2 weeks late when he was harvesting that Bermuda. So by just adjusting that, he would probably not have 6-7% crude protein if he had a chance to harvest 3 weeks later, 2 weeks earlier. He probably would have numbers more like 12, 13, 14% crude protein. Because we know as those plants hit that seed head point, the numbers just go down. And that's the reason why I like this slide here, where we can see as we're going to grow plants, and here have several plants in different stages of maturity, right? As we allow the plants to grow and they are changing the stage of maturity, we kind of move from a canopy that has basically leaves and new leaves to a canopy that now has more stems and some seed heads. And if you look at the very right one, at the very end of the slide here, we basically have a full seed head popped out on the top of that plant. So what we learned when we analyze these is that yes, my yield is growing, my yield is increasing. I will end up with high yield on that field, but there is no way I can hold quality, right? Those plants, they understand that as they get to the point that the seed heads are popping up, we are losing quality and everything is going to be different from that point forward. So what I'm looking for here is to try to identify that point. And I don't know how much you guys can see in your screen, but that's the first plant in my sequence of plants here where I can see a little bit of the seed heads popping up, right? So that's the point immediately after boot stage. Boot stage is when I can still feel the seed heads within the stem, but they are not visible. The next step is exactly that I'm showing you. So when we cross that boot stage line and the plants are starting to put some seed heads up, we still have some yield increase after that, but there is no way I can hold quality after that. And everything is going to be reduced from there on. So in a good summary, as we grow grass, as we allow them, the plants to be taller and bigger, we need fiber, right? Because we need stems. There is no way I can grow the amount of leaves in a canopy if I cannot grow the amount of stems to hold those leaves. And the stems are the ones that are going to bring to me fiber, NDF, ADF, lignin, right? And at the end of the day, they are energy as well, but they are more maturity issues. With that, we will have lower mineral concentration, lower leaf concentration, and consequently, lower crude protein and lower digestibility. So that's when we start to talk about forage systems from a really forage livestock perspective, right? We want to see that from the plant perspective and from the animal perspective. So from the plant perspective, the plant doesn't care if you allow that plant to grow longer. And really, that's really what the plant wants, is to produce the neat seed heads that will live in the field, a new seed. And everything, if everything goes wrong from now on, you still have those seeds that will come back and populate that pasture. So that's the rationale of the plant. On the other side of it, we have the animals, right? And the animals are the ones that will help us to understand what we are going to do with that plant to the point that I will make decisions that will help both of them. So when I think about the whole forage system from a forage perspective, that I'm going to grow forage so I can raise livestock, right? And as I like to say, there is no way I can be a good heifer producer, a good livestock producer, if I am not a good forage producer. Otherwise, I will spend a lot of money with supplement. But thinking on the whole system, how we can kind of stack those things on each other, I will start with what I have there as the land, right? Because that will define what are the plant resources I can have there. So what are my physical resources? Where I am at? How much rain do I have here? Is my growing season shorter or longer? For how long I can grow fascio? For how long I can grow crabgrass or Bermuda? How can I play with cool season plants and warm season plants within that system? Am I located more in the southern border of Tennessee where I was last week and now they are talking about Bahia grass? Or am I more towards the northern side of Tennessee where I can grow, good cool seasons, good orchard grass? Another day I was talking, even include like a Kentucky bluegrass, right? We will see that more in the northern side of the state. So depending on where you are, it pushes you more towards different plants. But we're here to accommodate all of this so we can define our animal resources. Tonight, I'll try to be focused on the heifers here. And I love the heifer focus because that's the animal we want to perform, right? Your heifers are probably the most valuable animal in your property because that's the future, right? That's your cows of tomorrow. So we need to take care really well of them. So when you understand your physical resources, the plants you have, the animals you have, and how you combine all of them. Now what we have what I call system management. Now I'm understanding what I have, what are my goals, and where am I going? Because if you do not know what are your goals, how can you make the path for your farm, right? Defining the system profile and how you're going to accommodate all of this. Because in the end of the day, the decision that is last here is the decision that where and when to move the animals. Knowing your pastures, having them, fenced off, knowing the number of animals you have and what are your goals, the next step is to define where to move the animals and when to move the animals. And that's what we call grazing management. And we can do it in several ways. I'll mention a few of them to you today. And I know not all of us are full-time farmers in Tennessee, and timing is something that needs to take into consideration beyond resources, budget, I mean, labor and financial resources, right? Both together. When we start to talk about grazing management, the first thing that comes to my mind is continuous stalking or continuous grazing, right? That's the way we call that outside. And when I think about this, I'm really thinking about a single pasture. Imagine that you have an 80-acre pasture. You have 25, 30 mama cows, gonna leave them there and give them the chance to stay there, right? So there is no really a grazing, defined grazing period. There is no really a resting period for your plants or a grazing cycle. You only have 30 mama cows in a pasture and they have access to everything all the time. So there is no rotation at any point. Those cows are the ones making the call. They are the ones deciding when to graze, where to graze, and for how long. They also are the ones deciding that there is no grazing interval. So I can graze a plant here today, and tomorrow, if I decide to come back and graze that plant again, I will do it because there is no fancy telling me where to go, when to go. In that case, also, there is no way we can adjust the stocking rates because you have that 80-acre pasture and you cut loose 25, 30 mama cows on that place, right? So this is probably the easiest way to work with them, where fewer decisions were to be made. And it is still a common practice, right? When I visit farms around Tennessee, I'm still finding places like this where the animals are pretty much in a pasture for most of the growing season. And and really, really, from the animal perspective, there is not a big of a problem if your stocking rate is low. It's going to be a problem when you start to push your stocking rate or when you are not giving plants the chance to rest as you push the stocking rate. That's when we start to talk to have, you find bare ground You start to have weeds popping up, and the plants and the pasture overall is starting to have a thin stand because we have no control. Again, the cows are in charge of everything. And that's probably the reason I really like rotational methods, right? And I'm not talking about having 120 paddocks in your operation, okay? We'll get there. But when you move from having no control of the grazing management to have some source of control of the grazing management, we are into that first big step. Now I can define grazing period, which will be the time a paddock is grazing. Now we'll define the resting period, which is the time interval between two successive grazing events in the same paddock. How long is it going to take to me to come back to pasture number 12? Is it a 20 day? Is it a 30-day cycle? I have the capability now to do it if I have more paddocks. And with that, I will define my grazing cycles, which is the time it takes for the herd to make a complete cycle in a system and come back to that single pasture again. Listen, that just as I talk about this, it brings to us a better sense of control of that system, right? And sometimes it's a very simple control because sometimes it's just because you divide that 80-acre paddock in two paddocks of 40. And by doing that now, while you're grazing one pasture for 30 days, the other one is resting for the same 30 days. And every time you decide, okay, now I'm moving my cows there, and now we allow that pasture to be grazed while I'm resting the other one. So now the cows have control of half of the land, and you have control of the other half of the land. Bruno, I like that, right? That's a feeling that I like to have as well. Sometimes we struggle to take the first step and just pull the poly wire and divide that big pasture in two smaller pastures now. And most of the times when we get excited with that gain of power, gain of control, we divide not only in two, but in three paddocks, right? And now, if you have three paddocks instead of one big pasture, we are grazing only a third of the area, while 2/3 of that area is now under resting. And the more we can rest plants, the better they will grow, the faster they will grow, and the faster they will recover after a grazing period, right? And look again, now that I have a rested pasture, I'm going to move my cows there and I'm going to graze that one and keep the other two on the grazing, on the rest. So the first one, when we just divide that pasture in two, we had 50% control. Now we have 66% control. 2/3 of those pastures are only going to be grazed when I want them to be grazed, not when my cows decide to come here, right? And remember, when we have that 80-acre paddock, cows are not going to the very back of that pasture. They are going to be close to the water, close to the minerals, close to the gate, close to you overall. They don't want to go to the very back. They will not go all the way there. And sometimes you find yourself bushy hogging a back of a pasture because the animals never went there. And you cannot graze that pasture anymore because it's too mature, it's too tall. The cows are not interested in that area at all. And then we start to overstock a part of that big pasture and overgraze the part of probably is close to the gauge, close to the water, close to the minerals, right? So overall, as we move towards improvement, when we are talking about grazing management, we want to have more control. We want to decide when and where to move the animals. A simple example here is if you define that you want to have better control of the process and you want to, have a rest period around 30, 33 days. My example here is with 33 days resting and 3 days of grazing, right? And Bruno, why did you use 3 days here as the number to divide it? The 33 can vary a lot, but the 3 days grazing period here, I like to use it because what we learned from the science-based information we have is that after the third day grazing a pasture, you start to see a bunch of new leaves. And the animals will tend to come back to those new leaves instead of keep grazing the older ones that they haven't had a chance to graze yet. So if you keep them there for 5 days, for 7 days, you know, it's fine if you don't have a chance to move them, but if you do have a chance, you move it, and those new leaves will become ready and ready available earlier. So you start to speed up the whole process. So if I divide my 33 by 3 and plus and add one, I will figure out that I need 12 paddocks to be able to be grazing one for 3 days and allow the other 11 to be in rest for the next grazing cycle. So every time I'm using one, I have other 11 there. And I will not be in a single pasture for more than 3 days. And I probably, after 30 days, I will be back, 33 days, I will be back to the pasture number one. The beauty of this is, as we moved in and I closed the cycle, you see that the amount of regrowth we have from the pasture side is tremendously. It's really, really nice. Now you don't have control about, 2/3 or 3/3 of your pasture. You have control of most of it because you can rest 11 out of 12 paddocks at a time. It brings to you the capability to move animals around and not only going from pasture one to pasture two to pasture three, but you might be moving from one to two and you see like pasture number 8 is already ready to grow because we have different soil tests. You might do not have grazed that pasture number 8 all the way down last time you passed by. So you do not really need to go from one to two and from two to three. You can just move it in wherever you want based on the growth you have in each of them. And we know pastures will grow in different way. If you want to kind of make it even better, uh, I want to share an example here of one of the guys I worked with. He got excited with this and he was just putting poly wire everywhere. And he decided that he would be moving cows twice a day. Bruno, are you recommending us to moving cows twice a day? I have more to do in my life. No, I'm not telling you to move cows twice a day. I'm telling you that we do have people and good people moving cows twice a day, and they have been seeing the value of it, right? I would be happy if you can move cows every few days, but we know that people that are full-time farmers and they really have time to put into this, they have been moving faster and faster, and it does help them, right? This guy decided that he would move twice a day, so he bought this equipment that kind of releases the gate, the fancy gate there. So he was moving his cows every time early in the day from 7 to 8 a.m. But he goes home at 5 and he really wanted the cows to have the next paddock by the end of the day. So that gate will be released at 7 p.m. every day. And the polywire kind of stretches and comes back to the corner. And the cows learn that every night they have a new free pasture, right? And they will move into that green new pasture and they will be there overnight. They will rarely come back to the pasture which is behind because it is already grazing for 12 hours. So they will explore the new one. So he learned that he can move the cows twice a day without being there twice a day. And every day, when he arrives there at 8, he moves into pasture number 3 and set up pasture number 4 to be grazing in the next evening. And he keeps moving around with his fence and his equipment to be able to do it. This is one of the beauties of having equipment that can help us today, right? The other thing that I think that's very important when we talk about grazing management, that using of smaller paddocks, is that you have a chance to also exclude one or more paddocks if you have the capability to, right? Imagine here again, you used to have your 80-acre pasture that you'd grazing during the growing season, and you had no control of it. But suddenly you decide that you can divide that 80-acre pasture now in 6 paddocks. And now you have a chance to move them in 6 different paddocks. And you're grazing, everything is good. Spring has been beautiful with us. Rain is right, temperature is right. You got into May. What happened with us in May? Most of us will have more forage than we can graze late May, early June, right? Because if you don't have that accident in May, what are you going to do in June, July, and August, right? So May is the peak of production for our fescue world here. So from somewhere starting in mid-April up to late May, early June, we will have a lot of forage in the farm. Again, if you only have that 8-acre pasture, how can you take the advantage of it, right? But if you divide your pastures and you start to rotate them, what if you come here and just skip a pasture? Because you don't need it, right? You have more forage than you can graze at this point. You have now a chance to come and make hay and make silage. Or if you're talking about springtime, you don't need to, uh, you don't need to just do not take the advantage of it, and you can stockpile it as well. So springtime, you may make hay, you may make silage of, a fifth, a third, a quarter of your pastures, because now you don't need the cows to be into that place. However, a few years ago when we didn't have it, how could you do it? You're just losing because you have no way to exclude that area to prepare it to use it later as a stockpile or to make hay or silage out of the accident that you have on the field at that time. Another thing that is very important to talk here on the grazing management is strip grazing, right? Sometimes, and I would say, especially when we're talking about stockpiling fescue, it's really, really important to have the chance to slice that pasture. As you're already spending money on this and you were able to stockpile some of these areas, why do not take the advantage of serve it in a small slice? If you just open the gate and allow your 25, 30, cows that is in a single herd to get in that pasture, they will trampling probably half of that stockpile fescue before even start to graze in it. So what we learn is if you did it and you have a chance to have at least a front fence, would be great. And you find people that use it with front and back fence, especially during the growing season where you can get some growth behind it. Or if you're grazing animals that that's going to regrowth after the first grazing. So we can move those animals, during the growing season or even during the winter when we are grazing annual cool seasonal plants. Again, with or without the back fence, it will help you to have a more accurate control over the grazing process. And every time I have control of what my cows are doing, I can do better. I can be more efficient. And I think that's the goal in the end of the day. I took those two pictures, gosh, 10, 12 years ago, my first time I went to visit New Zealand. And I know we are not New Zealand. We have a much bigger country here in terms of area and pasture land compared to them, right? They have a little tiny island in the middle of the ocean there. And it's really hard to compare things from here to there. But really, they are probably the most efficient country in the world in forage efficiency. Most of what we have in the literature on grazing management and grazing techniques, most of these things were developed there in the 1960s, from 1960 to 1990s, right? If you go to the core of the grazing management literature, is all from there because they don't have area. And when we don't have area, we have a small area, you gotta be efficient. You have no other way. So I really like the way they stockpile there. Those are both cool season plants that they use there during the stockpile. You see here heifers. In the second picture, we have some cows. They were already using some of the collars in the past, but those were not virtual fence. Those were just to take measurements from the animals. So they have been pushing hard on the technology for a few years now. And you see the amount of efficiency they have here in the first picture with the heifers. You can see how much the heifers ate. I think you all can see the poly wire here, right? And how much they are grazing here just by projecting their neck and picking the leaves ahead. So here they have someone that comes here every few days and give them a new slice of that pasture so they can improve the efficiency here of using whatever they have there. So we talk about continuous grazing, rotational grazing, the ability to stockpile or to strip grazing as we go, as we can use those techniques. But there is another one that I want to share with y'all that's not kind of very common here. But when we are talking, now when Matt and I were discussing today, and they talk, man, I will talk about grazing management, and if the heifers are kind of the goal, this is something that is more common in dairy operations, but I've been seeing this in beef cattle operations with heifers as well. And that's what we call first and last grazers, right? This is a little bit more fine-tuning grazing management technique. But if you have young or more demanding animals, you can have them moving ahead of the herd. So, for example, if you have 4 paddocks, you can get your heifers ahead of it, bring them to graze. They'll graze just the top of that canopy, right? Basically leaves. And then you kind of move them to pasture number 2, and you bring your cool cows or animals with lower requirements that will come behind them to eat that other half that you left behind. So every time we do this, we're always moving first the animals that have higher requirement, and then you move last the ones that have lower requirement. Again, it takes a little bit more of labor, it takes a little bit more of time, but the forage quality that animals moving first are receiving, it's much higher than the quality that the ones that are moving last are receiving. So if you want to play with, again, yield and quality and fine-tune grazing management, that's another technique that we can use here to make sure that we are saving money on supplement and hay just by better grazing our pastures as we go. So to kind of wrap up all of this on the grazing management, I always like that 60 or 80 acre pasture example because we still have some of that around us where you have no control, right? The animals are making the call, it's on them. But then you can divide it in two, and now you have 50% control of everything that happens there. And then you have the third and 2/3 on rest. You're just increasing your power to do it better and to graze it better up to a point that you might divide it in 4 and 6 and 8. And the question you have in your mind now is, Bruno, is there a right number, right? Is there a number that works best? No, there is not, because it is 100% dependent on your time, on your availability to make investments, and really how much effort you have available to put on that activity, right? That guy that I mentioned to you guys that he was moving cows twice a day, he was fully invested on that thing. That was his only job. He was running his operation and he was happy by moving cows twice a day. He saw the changing in animal performance and he was pensing out everything he was doing there. I cannot tell the same thing to someone that has a, a day job and move cows in the end of the day when they have time to do it, right? So it needs to be on you to identify what works best for you within your operation. That's my goal here at the end of the day. What I want you to have clear is as you move forward, you also need to take into consideration not only frequency, which is how often we move our animals here, right? That's frequency. We also need to take into consideration intensity, which is how much we take out of these pastures, how much we are using and pulling out of the outer pastures, right? Because you can graze a pasture up to an inch if you want it, but you can be a little bit less greedy and pull it up to 3 inches or 5 or 7, right? And you will play with that based on that first graph that I showed to you. When you know that quality and yield is kind of playing with you up and down. So if my pastures are getting ready and I know that I'm getting to boot stage, why I'm pushing here my animals to get up to 3 inches if I already have a new pasture ready there? I move forward to that one. And if I need to leave 5 or 7 inches behind, that's even better because now I have a lot of leaves that were left behind. And these are our solar panel. Those are the ways those plants will capture the sunlight and transform that in energy and grow new leaves for me. So the more I can just graze the tips, the more often I can come back to those pastures and offering always good high quality to those animals there. On the other side, if you keep pushing it to an inch, to quarter of an inch or half of an inch, we're exposing ground. Now we have bare ground. Now we have many more weeds being popping up there. And now we need to spend more money with herbicides. The more I work towards those 4 or 5 inches, stubble height, the less sunlight is touching the ground, the less are the chances that my weeds will pop up and I will need to spend more money controlling it. So look, again, if you only have that 80-acre pasture, how much control do you have? How much money are you spending with herbicides or soil erosion and bare ground? And the more you divide it, higher are your chances that you can better control everything, you can better graze, and you can better manage your pastures. Without mentioning that every time we graze the top, we are also grazing the bottom. We're just not seeing it. And when we don't see, we don't feel it, right? But the shorter I graze, the less I leave behind in terms of canopy above ground. I'm giving the same heat on the below ground here. The more you force your grazing pressure to graze it down, the least, well, the amount of leaves left behind is going to be lower. And those plants will need to uptake more from the roots where we have the carbohydrates, where we have the energy, the reserves to pull new leaves back, right? Imagine that you are a plant in that first picture here with 1 inch, or you are a forage plant on the 5 inch or in the 7 inch. Look at the amount of leaves you still have there. You barely need to use your roots. You barely need to burn energy and carbohydrates to push that thing back. So that's another reason we keep saying, you guys, that working with fast can between 3 and 5 inches. That's the sweet spot we are trying to keep because we still have a lot of green material left in the field. So grazing management to me is the combination of this frequency, how often I go around and come back to a single pasture, but also how much I'm taking out of this pasture. And those two things are happening at the same time. So if I want to speed up the process, I will leave more behind and I'll move faster to the next one so I can turn around faster. If I'm running and I need to stay a little bit more, I will stay a little bit more so I can gain more time to get to the next one. You can play like this if you are in a rotational grazing. If you have pasture that is divided into paddocks, right? So the beauty here is I will graze a paddock at a time. I'm not grazing the whole area all day long, all year long. And every time you divide it, the beauty of this thing is to have the other paddocks recovering from previous graze while you were grazing a single paddock. I know it's here in orange, right? We have fence costs, we have labor timing and cost, water source is always an issue. And look, I have all of these square paddocks here. You don't need to do square paddocks, right? You need to define a way and split your paddocks in a way that works for you. Again, you might have a pasture that has 10 acres, the other one has 12, the other one has 8. I don't care. The problem, the only difference here is going to be that if you have paddocks that they have from 5 to 10 acres, when you get to the 5 ones, you cannot allow the animals to be there for the same time that you have when they move to a 10-acre paddock, right? So if the area is larger, the animals are going to be there for longer, or you're going to leave more behind. But now you can play. If you know the area, if you know how many animals you're moving across those paddocks, you know what to do. So overall, when we move from continuous to rotational grazing, especially again with animals like heifers on the focus, we are going to improve our control of frequency, intensity, and time, right? You have a better rationing and you have more control on the intake and the daily forage supply. It's going to enable you to get that rapid and vigorous regrowth by maintaining your organic reserves, by preserving the leaf area index and protect the meristems on those plants. And that's when we start to have pasture growing better and faster on that place. Again, it needs investment and infrastructure overall and subdivisions. But we have been inventing things, okay, that will help us. I don't know how many of you guys have been seeing those two videos. The first one here just have a fence being lifted, and they have that kind of pole here that pulls the fence uh, towards the top, and it makes a big height on that, and we move animals. And it's automatically as well. They have like a kind of a small equipment that just pull that poly wire fence up, and the animals learn that they can move under. So you don't need to be there. The second one here is more on the data side of it. They have been using this, and that small robot can give the cows a few inches every few minutes. So we do have ways that we can mess up with them like this. Is that going to work? Probably. Uh, Requires some investment. I think the one that lifts the fence here is a little bit cheaper than the robo here. That robo can be very expensive. And that's something that we have been doing. I do have those two videos for a few years now, so none of this is kind of new. And we have been working to improve the way we graze, we improve our management in our grazing management. And I would say that the last invent on this, the last resource on this, is what we have been calling virtual fencing. Okay. It's not cheap. We just got into a set. We bought a set to use at Ames Plantation as well, our research center there in Fayette County, as I mentioned earlier today. Those colors will cost you from 280 from 280 to 350, which includes the color, battery straps, everything you need to start it. They don't require a tower. Uh, and in that place we are using, they have really the cell service there is not good at all. It comes with the first year subscription within that 280, $300 that you were going to pay. But after the second year, you pay 45 per color or 35 per color, depending on how many colors do you have. It's a subscription service, right? Here on the top, you can see the pictures of the heifers with it. We started this trial 2 months ago, and we have been able to learn how to use it. And I can tell you, it's not cheap, but it's pretty good to have a chance to move animals and see them in your cell phone all the time. I do have a way to connect my phone later. If you guys want to see them in real time, I can show you. But that's the kind of the view of the app when you open. So as soon as you have the animals in the area, you can draw this white line here, which I can change from my phone at any time. Here you see the number of the animal, the number of the color, in the number of the pasture they are in, and here is the battery on the collar. So those collars, they have like a solar panel in the side to keep those batteries running. We have been using this for 3 months now, almost 3 months. And you see, we still have batteries from 60 to 90% right now. So if you have more shady days or cloudy days, they will not charge it as much. The more they expose themselves to the sunlight, the better it will be. So we start this in May of this year. We are comparing two groups of animals there. We have a group of animals that is under continuous grazing, the other group that's under rotational grazing. We got two different pastures. We got a pasture with 15 acres and a pasture with 30 acres. We didn't have two pastures on the same size. So what we did was we put 13 heifers in a 13-acre pasture. You put another 30 heifers in a 30-acre pasture. They have pretty much the same weight. We separate them by the weight. So we could have them in a one animal unit per acre, right? We want to have kind of source that 15 heifers here in a 15-acre pasture and 30 heifers there in a 30-acre pasture. So we could play with the colors on the rotational graze. Our goal here is to have those heifers gaining 1.5 pounds per day. We hope we will get those numbers by November, December when they get into the breeding season. And for that reason, we have been supplementing 5 pounds of concentrate every day as well. So what we did was we got two pastures side by side. Here's the first one with the 13 acres. We just cut loose 15 heifers there and forgot that they exist. They will be there, right? Continuous grazing, continuous access to the pasture, and we are evaluating what's going on there. And then we have the second pasture that was side by side of it, pretty much same fertility, same forage composition. But this one had 54 acres, which to me is a situation that's very common for most of us. You have a bigger pasture than you needed, right? You remember I told you that I just need 30 acres because I was just putting 30 heifers here and I want to keep the one heifer per acre basis. So what we did was, okay, I have this 50-acre pasture, 55-acre pasture, but I need to use 30 out of this, which is again common that we will have more area than what we need, especially during the growing season. But now with the electric fence, with the virtual fence, I can control it. So we designed a pasture that had no more than 30 acres, and we will use this to graze subsections of that 30-acre pasture now. And we left that 15 acres on the top of the pasture. There is no division, there is no fence. It was just left unused because there was no other way we could do it, right? That was a 50-acre pasture, and we did not have a fence in between. So we designed some paddocks, and that's what the way you see there. All of this, each of these polygons here, each of those uh, big polygons are boundaries that we define to then to always have access to the water. Water is here, and shade is on this side as well. So most of my polygons, they need to allow animals to have access to water and access to the forest here so they can have shade. You see that there is one polygon that goes all the way to the north, but the animals were here probably for in the first 2 weeks of the trial, and after that we never used it again. So that was the first day, okay? Pay attention on this video. You see that we came there, we draw the line, and we brought the animals. Look what they did. They all went away in the first few hours. It was kind of, every time you see that yellow dot there is because they got the pulse, a electric pulse. You see, one just went away and came back. Every time you have the green ball, the green balloon there is because they listen to the audio. There is a audio alert and there is a electric pulse alert. So I'll put it again so you can see. This is day one. We draw the lines. They all went away and they came back. And if you look at the time, I will come back here. We start this, it was around 1 p.m. So most of the afternoon, they test that northern boundary. But by 10 p.m., everything was fine. It took then a few hours on that day. Even overnight, you see, at 6 a.m., one went away, came back. Now it's the whole day they're grazing here. They are smart animals. They learn how to use this. So the third image here, the second video, will show you a week later. You see, this was May 8th. This is May 14th. On May 14th, we decided to change then again. And this is early on the day. It's midnight. And we have been here seeing them overnight. So you see everybody's quite there. And when we get close to 11 a.m., we draw a new boundary and we'll move them. So you see 7:30, 7:50, 8 a.m., they start to graze around. Every once in a while, one of the animals will test it. And that was 11. We changed it. Most of them went inside. And then they spent a few hours during that day. You see, that's 2 p.m., 3 p.m. They're all going back and forth from the water. And they are testing the new boundaries because they need to know where they are, right? But as they get close and they got the sound, they kind of move back. And what impresses me is it's really interesting to see that some of the animals, they don't get to test, and some of them are testing all the time. And that's what we realize as we're moving here. We also measure crude protein and digestibility along, throughout the trial just to make sure that we are having good forage. But the thing that I was really interested to know was, how many sounds, warning sounds or electric pulse does a heifer take during that period? And I pull here the whole month of June while they were there because they started in May. I said, okay, May is really a training time. I pulled the whole month of June and we moved in a few times in June. What we learned was, on average, during the month, those heifers received 28 warning sounds. We had one heifer that received 86 and one heifer that did not receive more than 5. So you have leaders, you have followers, And what we have been realizing is as soon as the warning sound goes off in one heifer, the other heifers kind of back up as well. They don't really need to have the sound in their collars. As soon as they hear that on the group, they all start to back up. Uh, Electric push, they receive 1.8 on average within the month in 30 days. But we did have one that received up to 9 and another one that never received more than 1. So some of them we really learned how to use that and we quite the other ones will be always testing. And it's pretty nice to see when you put all of them. Here you see the 30 colors side by side. Average was 28 warning sounds, as I mentioned to you. You see, we do have a group that receive a lot more on the top here, maybe 6 or 7 of them. They're always testing. We have a middle group and a lower group here that they don't need the sound. They if they hear the sound of the others around, they come back. The same on the electric boost. The average was 1.8, as I had mentioned, but you do have a lot of one cow that he received 90 boosts, and then groups that we receive a little bit less. And here, more than half of them did not receive more than one electric boost within the whole month, right? That's June data set across the board. So I think it's a tool. It's again, it's not cheap. My goal, my hope is that like smartphones that we didn't have 10 years ago, in 10 years from now, that thing can cost less than this, and we will be able to better grazing our pastures as we move forward. The beauty of this to me as well, and I don't want to close today without sharing that. I remember that I mentioned to you that I have a 50-acre pasture that we just want to use 30 acres, but we didn't know what to do with that 15 acres on the top. Well, 3 weeks ago, I went there to talk with Matt, and I said, Matt, we have a lot of forage left over here. And that's pretty much what happened with us during the growing season, right? You don't have the capability of harvesting all of that. Sorry. But you also don't have the capability to exclude those areas. Here, just because we excluded that 15 acres that we didn't need, because even on the 30 acres that we are using now, we still have a lot of forage. I could probably, had made even more hay. But we decided to hay that area, and we end up with 42 hay bales on, last week, August 3rd. They harvested that 2 weeks ago. 900 pounds per bale. We already produced almost 19 tons of hay in an area that I will be probably overgrazing during the growing season because I couldn't exclude. If I multiply this by $55 per bale, we are talking about $2,300 just on those 14 bales. Or if I decide not to sell them, I probably can feed that same group of heifers for another 30 days before getting into winter season, right? Before I really need to buy hay to feed them. So using those techniques to improve my grazing management is not only about grazing more efficiently that pasture that I'm now making the decisions, but also to have pastures that I will not be, I will not need then during the growing season, and I can save it, I can stockpile it, I can make hay out of it, and then I will start to stretch my grazing season because now I'm using the pastures more efficiently again. So to wrap up, guys, it's all about understanding what you have outside, right? What is your environment? What's your capability? What kind of pasture you're using? How can you play with yield and quality on the top of it? How you bring your animals in and for how long and where to provide to them the best intake that they can have it, right? So they can perform well for you. They can bring to you that animal product that you were looking for. It's all about us is stocking the right thing at the right time to make sure that we can get the right numbers as we move forward. So Matt, that's the kind of the message that I had for tonight. Gosh, I've been talking here for an hour now. I think we could try to open and go for questions. If you want me to try to share the app, I'll be happy to do so as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Certainly, let's open it up for questions. But sir, I'll lead off. So, the last 4 or 5 years have just been really brutal as far as the fall being able to do any type of reseeding to be able to have some rotational grazing pastures. Are you seeing any transitions maybe to incorporating portions of those pastures into annual grasses to be able to help offset where we can't necessarily get a monoculture of fescue growing and
Yeah.
trying to prioritize some of that fescue during the summer where it's not recovering as quickly as we would like, is trying to incorporate some of those summer grasses or just annuals in general.
Yes, Matt. One of the things that I like to say in Tennessee is I think when I see properties that are performing better, they all have some source of warm season plants and some source of diversity on the cool season side as well. That's not fescue only, right? In an ideal world, I think crabgrass has been sending a message for a while, right? It's tough to find a tall fescue pasture nowadays in Tennessee that has no crabgrass. What is the message behind that? To me, it's very clear, right? Nature is sending the message. Nature is telling us if you want to graze it better, you got to incorporate some of this. I just don't like the native crabgrass. I think it's just taking space, out of our pastures, and the yield is very limited. So I rather to incorporate some of the new improved varieties of crabgrass that can bring to us 3.5 tons per acre every year. My colleague Renata Oaks down there at Spring Hill, she has been working with crabgrass a lot. Every time I see Renata presenting those 18% crude protein, I'm always speaking on her. So Renata, it's great, but 18, 19% crude protein is insane. And she was, well, you were running the samples in the lab. You should believe on you in yourself, right? So, and yes, we have been seeing really, really nice numbers on crabgrass. I don't really I don't know if the best option, Matt, is to oversee the annual co-seasons on the top of fescue because I think they compete a lot. But oversee the annual co-seasons on the top of warm season pastures, it's amazing, right? If you have a Bermuda grass pasture that you can come in the fall and oversee it, amazing. If you have a crabgrass pasture that you can bring in your wheat, cereal rye, or any ryegrass on the top of it. Gosh, that's when we have the best of both worlds. I can graze my fescue 8, 9 months of the year, but I can have like those 3 months out of crabgrass, 4 months out of crabgrass, and another 3 or 4 months out of annual cool seasons on the top of that crabgrass later on or early in the spring.
I think that's great. And I guess I was sort of referring more to maybe having dedicated instead of
Yeah,
having
yeah.
part of your portion dedicated to just an annual rotation of cool and warm
Hmm.
season, and just taking fescue out of that rotation. Um, if you were in your mind, if you were going to take a portion of your pasture and dedicate just on a percentage wise, how much would you leave dedicated to fescue percentage wise, and then how much would you dedicate to a percentage being an annual rotation of cool and warm season?
I think the answer to that is on the portion of the month that you can graze it or not. So I like to think that I can graze a fescue from 8 to 9 months of the year. So from 2/3 to 3/4 of the year, I can do it, right? But I still need that another third that's going to help me to cover the warm season. So somewhere around 70, 75% of the farm, I would keep on fescue because that's our base, right? That's the reason we're in the middle of the fescue belt here. No, it was not you, it was not me that invented the fescue belt. We have this beautiful fescue belt around us here, and that's because fescue does great for 8 months of the year. So if you can keep 70% of the operation, 75% of the operation in fescue, and have a really nice 25% where you can combine that Bermuda grass, crabgrass with annuals such as annual rye wheat. I think wheat is a kind of plant that we have not been exploring in Tennessee enough. With my background there in Kansas, working with Kansas and Oklahoma folks, seeing them grazing 80% of the wheat in Oklahoma is grazed first and then harvest for grain later. Wheat is a plant that is as good as fescue. And especially if I need to go, later in the season and with those droughts that we have been having in the fall, when producers call me late in the fall So no, I know I'm out of the window. What am I going to plant now? It's just raining late November. Man, I would only take the risk on wheat. I think wheat is still can make a crop for you even when you plant late. If I'm going to take a risk, a chance on anything, it's going to be more towards wheat. I think we can use more of wheat on the top of crabgrass pastures here.
I think you've got a question in the chat regarding the virtual, if you're able to see it.
Yeah. We have not. The question is, have you quantified the amount of labor hours you have recovered using that fencing versus? No, we have been tracking this. And man, the idea is by the end of the pilot there, we'll try to come up with numbers like this. But it's here, right? I can move animals right now if I want it. I just pull my app and I show you what I have, and there is no need to go there moving fence. That's the beauty of that thing.
Great. Does anybody else have any questions? You can feel free to unmute if you want to ask them live. It's a great opportunity. We don't get a specialist like this very often. Uh,
Appreciate that.
let's see here. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, then I will thank you, Dr. Pedreira. This is a great information. We truly appreciate it. Just to let our audience know, Dr. Pedreira is across the state in a lot of different ways, doing a lot of field day, and so he has a master forage program that he also offers. You can do a combination of a hybrid of completely online or partly online and partly through some of his field days. So it's a great resource that he's provided. So we can't thank him enough for that. So as always, if you guys have questions for Dr. Pedreira, please feel free to reach out to me and we can get that passed along. And we look forward to having you in the county here soon, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you so much, Matt,
Thank you
and
very
thanks
much.
for mentioning the Master Forage program and also utbeef.com, right? The website of the Beef and Forage Center has a lot of information, a lot of beef and forage extension publications and variety trials information. It is all there. So look forward to see you guys in person at some time soon.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great
Thank you
night.
all. Appreciate that.